The upcoming local government elections have been postponed. The Independent Electoral Commission has adopted recommendations by former Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke's inquiry, which found the holding elections in October wouldn't be free and fair. Moseneke says some of the processes that must happen before they take place would be impossible to do so due to lockdown restrictions. Govan Whittles is on that story for us. Govan, thank you so much for your time. You were listening to the commissioners outlining that they have now decided to adopt the recommendations by Justice Moseneke. What work is going to unfold now going forward?
Well, Clement, now they need to start the process to officially and formally have the elections postponed to the date which was suggested by the former Deputy Chief Justice, Dikgang Moseneke. And this is important because the former Deputy Chief Justice was brought in by the IEC to conduct this investigation, and the adoption of his report by the IEC doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end of it and the elections are now postponed. They still need to have this confirmed, and they'll do this by going to a court of law. The IEC saying that they're currently in legal consultations on which court to approach, but it does look like that while they may start at the electoral court, the constitutional court will have to adjudicate this matter and give that go-ahead. And that's important because in the party liaison committee, that's the committee made up of political parties that meet with the IEC, there is significant opposition to the recommendation to postpone the elections. And whether or not that opposition would translate into an opposition to the IEC's application at court might be too early to tell, but still worth discussing what might happen. And with me I have the CEO of the Independent Electoral Commission, Mr. Sy Mamabolo. Mr. Mamabolo, thank you so much for your time. So just explain to us why the IEC needs to go to court to have this confirmed first before the elections can be adopted.
Well, this is an extraordinary situation. It's an intractable situation which requires judicial authorization, because essentially we are asking the court to authorize an election to happen outside of the time that is constitutionally prescribed. Now, for any such constitutional breach, you need authorization by the judiciary.
And you don't need authorization from the national legislature?
Well, the only possibility that the national legislature could have played was by way of a constitutional amendment. Now, that will require a supermajority, in our view, of at least 65% of the National Assembly and the support of at least 6 provinces. So practically that option is no longer available because of the time it would take to secure an amendment of that nature.
So how much pressure is the IEC under right now to ensure that the election goes ahead by no later than February 22, as has been suggested by the former Deputy Chief Justice, considering the cycle of local government and the time when people are supposed to be adopting budgets in those local municipal councils?
Look, we've never had to deal with a case such as this before since the advent of democracy in the country. And we are alive to the need to have municipal councils with legitimacy so that they can pass budget and govern the local affairs of communities with a mandate. And we are alive further that these councils must be in place to pass budget for the next budget cycle from the 1st of July next year.
Nevertheless, the date of the 27th of October had been set, and the IEC, while it approaches the courts asking for a postponement, will still be planning to hold the election on the 27th of October in case the courts don't rule in your favor. That seems like an additional expense. Does the IEC have enough money to do that?
Well, money is in short supply, but lack of certainty also creates expenses in and of itself. Lack of certainty creates further expenses, which is why we need certainty from courts. That's one. As we await the determination of the application in the judicial forum, we need to proceed as if an election was taking place, so that we are not seen to be giving a court a fait accompli. It is important that we continue the process until the matter is finally determined in an appropriate court of law.
What about the capacity of the IEC? Do you have the capacity to essentially now start to plan 2 elections?
Well, we do have the capacity. Stressed as we may be, we have to stay the course and ensure that we remain true to the mandate conferred on us by the Constitution.
Lastly, if you would weigh in here, CEO, there are a number of political parties in the PLC, the Party Liaison Committee, that have already opposed any sort of notion. Are you preparing that the election should be postponed? Are you preparing for a confrontation with them, possibly going to court against them?
We wouldn't see it as confrontation. We'll see it as part of the normal democratic process. Is normal constitutional engagement. And in a democracy such as ours, people hold different views, and they must vindicate those views in whatever forum they so desire. It's not a confrontation, but it's a democracy in action, as it were.
All right, thank you so much. That's the CEO of the Independent Electoral Commission, Sy Mamabolo. And just to give you some explanation on the date of February 22, 2022, Clement, even though there's only 4 months between October and February next year, the date is important because it was agreed upon after studying the waves of the coronavirus in the country, and it's an attempt to predict when we're likely to have a lull in infections and cases in the country, while at the same time February would be the ideal time to hold the election because the end of the financial year for those municipal councils is March and April, which is just a month after that. So it's a very tight date, and it does look like they can't afford to postpone it any further than that. But then again, they may have to hold it in October if the Constitutional Court decides their reasons are not good enough to postpone the election.